Yes, guys, welcome back to another video here on the Andy #1 channel. Today is another goalkeeping week in review where I'm joined by data scientist, football statistician, all-round nice guy, John Harrison. John, I missed something out there as well, didn't I? I missed astrophysicist. John, how are you doing today?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I'm doing well. You don't have to mention astrophysics. It's been a while since I finished my PhD, so you don't always have to bring that up. But it is quite nice.
It's a good one to add in. But you might not have been looking at the stars recently, but you have been looking at football stats.
Indeed. So this week we're going to talk about a graphic I made looking at finishing and how much of finishing is luck and how much of it can be assigned to skill, basically from the striker, and how does that quantify and come into goals scored in the Premier League.
So it's not a specific goalkeeping specific stat that we're looking at, but there is an element of goalkeeping that sits within there as well. So we'll flash the graphic up on screen. This is what we're talking about today, but first of all, give us a quick run through of what all these different acronyms mean, what all the different stats are that you're looking at in order to build a graph like this, and then we'll talk about the actual contents of the graph in a minute.
Yeah, so on basically the three main things I'm going to talk about in this graphic are expected goals, which is abbreviated to XG, EXG, post-shot expected goals, which is abbreviated to PSExG, and actual goals scored, which everyone knows what they are. So expected goals is basically a model that you look at every single shot a team takes, and you look at how far out was the shot. Was it 18 yards, 20 yards, 30 yards? What angle was it to goal? Maybe it was a really tight angle, maybe it was banging down straight down the middle of the goal. Was it a shot with the foot? Was it a header? Was the player under pressure when they took the shot? How many defenders were between the ball and the goal? Was the goalkeeper in position or were they out of position? And you can take all this information and basically say that a shot like this will, if we look at historical data, be scored, 10% of the time. So obviously a shot from 2 yards on a player's foot where the goalkeeper's lying down on the floor is maybe going to be scored 95% of the time, because it might get skied a few times, but most of the time that's going to go in. Whereas a shot from 40 yards with the goalkeeper set in position, 2 banks of 4 sat behind him, will probably go in 1% or 2% of the time. So it's a really nice way of saying not all shots are equal. So which chances are more important and more likely to result in goals than others? So that's the XG, and it basically looks at what quality of chances is a team creating.
Yeah. Now this stat has actually started to become a little bit mainstream, isn't it? For those people who watch Match of the Day, often in the bottom right-hand corner during a game, this pops up after as part of the analysis, doesn't it? So I think it's becoming a rather key stat within the mainstream media, which is good, because like you say, not all shots are equal. So previously, when it used to be shots 7-2, for example, who knows where those 7 have come from and the quality of those versus the 2.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the perfect way to use it. Thinking it as, instead of just using shot numbers, how likely those shots to go in. So like you say, if it was 7 shots to 2 shots, actually, if those 7 shots were from miles out and those 2 were from in the 6-yard box, expected goals might look like 0.10, so yeah, 0.1 to 1.5. And then suddenly you see, actually, taking 2 shots from close, that team's actually played much better and were much more likely to score than the team that had 7 shots. So yeah, that's perfect. The second thing I want to talk about is post-shot expected goals, which basically, that first model I talked about was all to do with what happens before the shot's taken. So the build-up and where the shot is and how it came to be. But post-shot expected goals takes into account where the striker places it and the power that they put on the ball. So you can imagine if you're, 6 yards out and you've got a header, maybe pre-shot, so the regular expected goals model would give you a 40% chance of scoring, a free header 6 yards out, whatever. But if you then just scuff the header, it loops straight up in the air and just goes straight down the middle of the goal, you can imagine that drops very rapidly to about 1% of the time. Maybe if the goalkeeper came out for the cross and missed it, that's going to go in. But every other time, that's just straight in the keeper's hands. So this post-shot expected goals takes into account finishing. And similarly, it might drop down a lot if you scuff a shot, but if you rifle it into the top corner, or if we go back to that heading example I was at, if you have a free header 6-yard box and you just bang, top corner, 25 miles an hour or whatever, suddenly that won't be a 40% chance of scoring anymore. It might jump up to 90% because it's going to take a worldy clearance or a worldy save from the keeper to pull that out of the top corner. So this is where we can now start to look at how a team finishes, because we can think about expected goals sort of pre-shot before the shot happens, and then what is their post-shot expected goals. So once the shot's been taken, how likely is it to go in now? Obviously, if you sky it, it goes down to 0. But if you rock it in the top corner, it's going to get much, much closer to 1.
So that denotes how good a team is at finishing. Does it also take into consideration goalkeeping?
Yeah, indeed. So I think on these videos before, that's how I've called something expected saves when I've tried to evaluate a goalkeeper's performance and how good a goalkeeper's performance was relative to average. And basically, this is just the opposite of expected saves in a way. So, for example, we could look at, I don't know, a team might have a post-shot expected goals of 2. So you'd expect them to score 2 given the quality of their finishes. But if the team only conceded 1, that means the goalkeepers exceeded their expected saves, really. And he's made a worldy save in there somewhere and saved his team a probable goal. So this is the nice thing about post-shot XG. It can look at both the finishing, but then if you just take it away from the actual goal scored, you can see an element of goalkeeping. And it can go 2 ways, because I've given a good example there. So if the post-shot expected goals is 2, but the keeper only concedes 1, he saved an extra goal. But what if the post-shot expected goals is 2 and the keeper concedes 3? So he could actually be making mistakes and conceding more than they should. So it is a really useful metric to see how a goalkeeper is performing sort of in terms of an average Premier League goalkeeper. And I think we always like to stress on this channel that we're talking about the average Premier League goalkeeper here. We're not talking about like an average goalkeeper over the world. So like conceding 1 or 2 goals more than the average Premier League goalkeeper doesn't mean they're a disastrous player by any stretch.
By any stretch of the imagination. So just getting the graph up that you put forward, we've got these 4 quadrants. We've got about skill and we've got luck.
Yeah.
Right. Talk us through the graph.
So basically, we've got what I call luck on the horizontal axis, so going across, and that's what I call goals added due to opposition goalkeeping. So this is when you take the amount of goals a team's scored and you take that away from their post-shot expected goals. So as I was explaining before, if that number's positive, so there's it's like 3 or 4 or 5, that basically means the team's got very lucky because the opposition goalkeeper has thrown in a few or made a few howlers or made a few mistakes, or maybe it's just added up over the course of a season, haven't made as many worldies as you'd expect them to. So you could get, that's why I call it luck, because if you're playing every team once, you wouldn't expect to always face goalkeepers that are making mistakes or always face goalkeepers that are putting in man of the match performances. So I call it luck if you're a positive number here, because that just means goalkeepers have been making more frequent mistakes against your team than you would expect. And similarly, if that number is negative, that's just being unlucky, because obviously if you've got post-shot expected goals of, I don't know, 20, and you've actually only scored 10, that means opposition goalkeepers have consistently been making worldy saves against you, and you've scored 10 fewer goals than you actually should have, assuming you played an average quality goalkeeper, average Premier League quality goalkeeper every week. So yeah, the x-axis is all to do with luck, because it's just how is the opposition goalkeepers fared given what they should on average. So a positive number means you're lucky, and a negative number means you're less lucky.
Yeah. Now you're obviously very heavily into Twitter, and if you're not following John, make sure you do go follow John on Twitter now for some quality insights. But this is brilliant because there's a narrative around a few teams which we're going to discuss in a little bit more detail for both. But this actually then quantifies that. So when certain teams say keepers have worldies against us every week, we're seeing this actually now puts a number to that, so you can quantify that.
Yeah, no, indeed. And that's exactly why I made this graphic, because and I think we're going to discuss in a second, there's quite a few narratives floating around about various teams, and you can actually put numbers to see if they are reinforced by the stats, or if it's just a few odd games that people remember more than others. So I'll quickly explain the y-axis, the sort of skill, the vertical axis. And that is just what I talked about at the start, which is this post-shot expected goals minus expected goals. So it's the goals added due to finishing. So yeah, if you're taking shots that are normally worth, I don't know, 20% of the time they go in, but your finishers are just going in the top corner every single time, and you're turning them into like 80, 90% chances of going in, then obviously there's a lot of skill involved in that. And if you're doing that consistently over a season, you're going to have a positive number of this, because you're going to be increasing the expected goals of the shots you're taking due to their power and placement. But obviously, on the other hand, if you have a negative value of this, maybe you're taking shots that should be going in 50% of the time, but you just keep skying them, and you end up having a negative value of this, and that's going to show a lack of finishing skill. So yeah, as you said at the start, Andy, the four quadrants sort of show which teams are, the higher up you are, the more skillful your finishers have been this year, and the lower down, the less skillful they've been. But then there's also this element of luck, depending on the opposition goalkeeper's performance, that pushes you. If you're right, you're being quite lucky, and if you're right on the left side, you're being pretty unlucky that goalkeepers just keep pulling worldies out against you.
So just looking at that graph, just to pull out a couple of the teams, I'm just going to pick out Newcastle first of all, because Newcastle are smack bang. I mean, from a league form perspective, they're not doing great. There's obviously lots of talk on Twitter and wherever else about the ownership of Newcastle, the management of Newcastle. There's all that discussion going around. But in terms of look, the goalkeepers that they're facing, they're smack bang in the middle there. In terms of the skill of their strikers and their finishing, they're smack bang in the middle there. So they're performing as you'd expect from a goals perspective then.
Yeah, indeed. So you can see why the Newcastle fans probably are getting quite irate with the whole situation and want the club to progress, because in their eyes, they're definitely a top half Premier League team and probably want to be pushing for Europa League. That's probably where Newcastle fans see their team, and they're not getting unlucky, and they don't have a high quality set of strikers. They are just bang average at everything at the moment. So they're sitting in a table where they deserve to be. And I guess that's probably part of the frustration that they feel. They can't be complaining that they're getting unlucky. Their position is what it probably should be. Hence, from this graph, you can see they're basically average in all aspects.
Yeah, Newcastle fans, if you agree with John that you are bang average, that's John's words, not mine. Comment below. Now, the next team, just quickly on there, that are all in that top right-hand quadrant, who have recently just sacked their management after being their manager, I should say, after being in the European Super League for all of 2 days, I think it was, is Tottenham. Now, Tottenham have obviously got, a quality strike force. Harry Kane, Son up there, they are quality strikers, and that's shown there within that graph. As they're up, they've scored 5 more goals than you'd expect through being quality up front. But they've also had some help from opposition goalkeepers by the looks of things as well.
Yeah, indeed. So they're based on the shots they've taken. You'd have expected Tottenham to have scored 46 goals this year from the shots they've taken, but they don't just have, like you say, average strikers up front. They've got Son and Kane. So after you take into account placement and power of those shots, that number jumps up to 51. As you say, by an increase of 5 goals there. But Tottenham haven't scored 51 goals this year. They've scored 55 if you discount own goals. So they've been handed an extra 4 goals basically from opposition goalkeepers not always performing at the level you'd expect against them. And I can already think of a few examples. The Gaita one that he got unlucky with because of the movement, and then a Sam Johnson, uncharacteristics. He's had a great season, also made a mistake against Tottenham. So yeah, it's one of those where if I was a Tottenham fan, I'd be quite worried about that, because effectively they probably should have expected to lose about 4 or 5 goals, because it's just down to luck of facing less than average quality goalkeepers at the moment, or at least less than average quality goalkeeping performances. And I'd also be worried if Son or Kane or both get injured, which they have done at various points this season, that they wouldn't look great, because again, their quality of finishes is providing them an extra 5 goals. And if you add all this together, Tottenham could lose 10 goals if Kane and Son either left the club or got injured for a while.
Yeah, now there's lots of, again, just going through Twitter and various different social media platforms, there's always Tottenham fans who weren't very complimentary about the style of football that Mourinho was playing, very complimentary on the side of that, of Son and Kane. So that kind of fits to what we're seeing there. The next team, just to pick up, is we've gone from the top right quadrant. We're now going to look at the bottom left quadrant, and there's one blue and white circle that is standing out as being hugely, it kind of extends the graph that way, and that is, of course, Brighton. So just reading this through, it looks to me as if Brighton have not scored 2 goals. They're negative on that horizontal axis due to opposition goalkeeping. So there has been some exceptional performances against Brighton, but there are 12 goals they haven't scored due to the I was going to say the lack of finishing, the poor finishing, and again, that seems to fit the narrative that we're reading and hearing about on Twitter and various other sources.
Yeah, indeed, you've read that exactly correctly, Andy. So interestingly, Brighton, their expected goals is exactly the same as Tottenham. They should have scored 46 goals based on the chances they've created. But the crazy thing is, their placement massively deteriorates this number to just 34 goals. So basically, because of Maupay and Welbeck's finishing, they've gone from chances worth 46 goals right down to chances worth 34 goals, because they've been either putting it over the bar, putting it wide, hitting the post, whatever, rolling it straight down the middle to down the keeper's throat. And those 12 goals are obviously a huge amount and a big difference between Brighton being in a relegation battle, as they are, versus Brighton being comfortable mid-table, maybe challenging for a top half finish. But the thing we should also mention is, and then to even compound the misery, now they've got 34 post-shot expected goals. They didn't even score that. They only scored 32 because some good opposition goalkeeping further took some goals away from them. So I think, the narrative for Brighton fans is going to be, you have been a little bit unlucky, but you've probably only been 2 goals unlucky. The rest has been down to your own poor finishing, and potentially either they need to somehow revitalise Maupay, because I think he hasn't always been a striker with such a bad finishing reputation as he's got this year, or they probably need to go into the market and see if they can get a more clinical finisher, because it has cost them big time this year.
Just on top of that, of what you're saying there as well, although they're in that bottom half, that bottom third as such, and they should have scored a lot more goals than they should have scored, not every goal is equal, is it? In terms of the amount of points you might accumulate over a season or over a period of time. There's a goal in a 7-0 victory, the 7th in a 7-0 win is not the same as a single goal in a 1-0 win, is it?
No, exactly. And you could actually sort of extend the sort of graphic I've done further on and sort of look at each individual game and use the goal probabilities and the finishing probabilities that we've got to sort of get an expected points. So we could actually convert, like we were talking about Son and Kane earlier, we could convert their extra 5 goals effectively that they've got Tottenham into an amount of points. Because maybe, like you said, they've just been stat padding in 6-0 wins against Man United or whatever, 6-1 wins. It was Tottenham.
Flat track bullying.
Exactly. But there could have been loads of games where it's 1-0 and they've finished a chance that's, a 10% chance, and they've smashed it top corner and made it a 90% chance. So you really want to include those. So this is more of a averaged over the season graphic, but like you say, if we wanted to sort of pin down exactly how important some of these goals were versus other ones and how important some of the misses were versus other ones, we would want to sort of propagate this through and look at expected points.
The third team, just to chat about quickly, well, I say quickly, we're going to go into a little bit more depth with this, is the reigning champions, Liverpool. So Liverpool this year they're struggling a little bit in their quest for Champions League football. Why is that, John, according to the stats?
Yeah, so obviously there's going to be some defensive stats we could look at as well. But actually the main reason for this isn't on the defensive side, which is funny given their injuries, but it's actually on the offensive side. So if we look at this sort of second graphic I've made, which gives you all of the data points for the last 4 seasons, we can see what's happened to Liverpool. So firstly, we'll talk about what's happened this season, and then we'll compare that to the previous 3. So this season, they're in the bottom left quadrant, and they're basically bang on average for finishing. So their strikers are on average missing as many as they should and putting as many in the top corner as they should, given the shots they're taking. So they're not underperforming, they're not overperforming, they're pretty much average. But the crazy thing is, look how far left they are. So in fact, 8 goals Liverpool have been cost by just opposition goalkeepers putting in man of the match performances week after week, which is by far the most in the league this year, and in fact the most over the last 4 years. Apparently Fulham, in their, not this season in the Premier League, 2 seasons ago, are the only team that can get close to this by an opposite. Basically, it just must mean that every time Liverpool turn up, the opposition keeper's like, here we go, big game for me today. And that's an incredible result, really, that 8 goals, given Liverpool have scored, 52 this year. So that's a huge fraction of their total goals. That's an interesting, 52 and 60 goals. Just because, goalkeepers seem to love playing Liverpool at the moment. And the good thing for Liverpool fans is that will have to go away. There's no way that because it's a measure of luck, basically. There's no way that opposition keepers can constantly not make mistakes and constantly make really good saves week after week. because they're not playing the same goal. If they were playing Neuer and Oblak every week, then I would expect that to stay. But they're not. They're playing all 19 other Premier League goalkeepers. So, yeah, it's been weird. There's been a big slice of sort of unluckiness, actually, in Liverpool's drop.
Yeah. And also on the other side of that is the skill element of things. Now, I've mentioned a few times on these videos, fantasy football, and this is my measure now on who do I want in my team and who do I don't know. Last year, I would have had Salah, my captain, and I would have had Mane in there as well. Not so much Firmino, but those three were on fire, especially Mane and Salah. And this year, they just haven't seemed to have been the same as last year. And again, this reinforces that. Yeah,
indeed. So if we now concentrate on the sort of second graphic with all the different teams from the last 4 seasons and the 4 Liverpool points highlighted, you can see that consistently Mane, Salah and Firmino have been scoring more goals than, well, I'll say than they should, but it's not really than they should. It's that their pre-shot expected goals to post-shot expected goals, their finishing, their power and placement has resulted in more goals than an average striker would if they were in those positions. So you can see in 17-18, they were scoring about 6 more goals than if average strikers had taken those, average Premier League strikers had taken those shots. And then 18-19, this moves up to about 8 more goals. And then it's basically 10 more goals a season just because they've got that front three who are so lethal. And yeah, they win the title that year because those extra 10 goals are going to be vital in staving off Man City's title charge. And as you say, this season, suddenly that goes straight down to 0. So Mane, Firmino and Salah now are all finishing like average Premier League strikers. And so suddenly Liverpool have lost 10 goals just from their strikers not being on form. And I think they could probably have dealt with that if it wasn't for the defensive injuries and also for the fact they've got so unlucky with opposition goalkeepers. Because this graphic basically shows you that Liverpool have lost about, 8 and then 10. They've lost about 18 goals. 10 of them being from their strikers not being on their prolific best, and 8 of them being just opposition goalkeepers and being unlucky that they just keep pulling them out of the top corner and keeping clean sheets against them.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned Newcastle as the first club that we looked at with that, and now Liverpool, and it seems a bit ridiculous to say that actually you could swap Liverpool's front 3 forwards with Newcastle's and the outcome potentially be the same.
At least in terms if they just took the shots.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot more to football in terms of the off-the-ball runs and the chances they create for themselves. But yeah, if you literally teleported, if you could teleport the strikers, as soon as the shot was about to be taken, swap the strikers over and teleport them in and let them take the shot. That is how Liverpool strikers have performed this year. Their finishing just, has been average, has been what you'd expect of an average Premier League striker, which isn't, weirdly, what you'd expect for an average Liverpool striker over the past 4 years. They've been finishing at a rate usually well above. And potentially you can look at this graphic and say maybe last year they overachieved. Maybe, because it is sort of just keeps going up like that, doesn't it? Maybe they finished a little bit better than they normally should because of, I don't know, streaks of confidence or a little bit of luck. But yeah, definitely there's been a big drop off this year, and I still would expect those 3 strikers to be at the sort of giving you 5 of 6 goals, like the Kane and Son we talked about earlier, extra a season due to their finishing qualities. And
I think that's actually the perfect place to finish. John, absolutely, thank you very much for the insight. Love it. Love the model and all the stats and whatnot, and being able to back things up with these nice, pretty graphs that you've been putting together as well. That's not a great term that is to use for all the hard work that goes into this work, but it's very digestible information, which I really enjoy, which has obviously had a lot of thought put behind it. So thank you very much, John. As always, if you're not following John on Twitter, make sure that you are. If you haven't liked this video already and you do like it, make sure you smash that like button, hit the subscribe as well for more content coming soon. Thanks for watching. See you all soon.